Hi everybody, this is Laura, City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have a layout that I made using the October My Creative Scrapbook limited edition kit. In the October kit, there were papers from a number of different manufacturers. The one that I'm using today though is one of the 49 and Market papers. I started off with some Finnabair clear gesso and I coated the entire piece of pattern paper. Now I'm going back in with a sponge and some white gesso. I have been wanting to make a layout that has a diagonal spray of flowers for quite a while, and I thought that this would be the perfect time to do that because this kit was just absolutely filled with flowers, not just the dimensional flowers, but also the die cut and laser cut flowers. So I had plenty of flowers to work with. That's why I'm putting the gesso on a diagonal going from the upper left-hand corner to approximately the lower right-hand corner, maybe a little bit in from the corner or the edge of the right side of the paper, but a large diagonal. I also added some gesso in the upper right-hand corner, and the gesso is to highlight the large cluster that I'm going to make going down the page, and then to highlight a smaller cluster that I'll put in the upper right-hand corner. Now I'm adding some modeling paste. I'm using a Finnabair stencil called Tapestry, and I'm adding some modeling paste in the same areas that I put the gesso. I think this is a really pretty stencil. I love when I have a chance to use it, and I thought that this pattern went so nicely with the pattern on the pattern paper. I used the palette knife to rough up the edge of the modeling paste so it's not a perfectly straight line. I added some modeling paste through the stencil in the upper right-hand corner as well. And then I was thinking that it might look nice to have some in the lower left-hand corner, even though I didn't put any gesso there. I was thinking that that would help to balance out the composition. I'm using another stencil. This is the stencil that came in this month's kit. This is a VIctorian stencil to add some Distress Oxide to the layout. I'm using Victorian Velvet. I tried it through the stencil and then I was a little afraid that the color was too bold, so then I started using the blending brush and just blending it into a few places on the background of the layout. And then I got more brave. I decided that I liked the color, and then I went back and used the blending brush and the stencil together. I love having the color scheme of light pink and light blue together, and that was the color scheme in a lot of the papers and embellishments from this month's kit. I wasn't so sure at first, but I ended up really liking the addition of hints of pink in the background. And because I have the clear gesso down on the page, any areas that I thought were a little bit too dark, I was able to lighten up using a paper towel and a little bit of water. Now I'm adding some watered down white acrylic paint and I'm splattering it all over the background, but mainly trying to get it on the large diagonal and those two other areas where I'm going to put some smaller clusters. I just feel like you can never have enough splatters. Now I am inking the edges of all of the embellishments that I plan on using in this layout. I'm using my favorite color that I use to ink elements that I put on my backgrounds. That is Distress ink in Vintage Photo. Sometimes I'll use other colors, but I do find that this is a go-to for me. There's just something about this color. It's not too light, it's not too dark. It gives some nice definition to the edges without making them look too dark. I inked everything, including this frame, and this is a frame that I'm going to put my photo behind. I just thought it was so pretty and just the right size for this layout. I'm also using one of the die cuts as a title, although I don't end up using the die cut that I was just inking then. Now I'm adding some stamping to the background. I often add stamping in black, but for this layout, I decided I was going to go with the Distress ink in Vintage Photo for the background too. I just thought the black might be a little bit too dark on this very soft, muted palette. And the stamp that I'm using is an old stamp that I got at a flea market, I think, a long time ago, and I love using it for backgrounds. It's a script stamp, and it just adds a nice touch to backgrounds. I also use another one of my go-to background stamps, which is a Stampin' Up dot stamp. I roughly cut out my photo and I put the frame on top of it. This is a photo of both of my daughters from Easter, not last year, but the year before. I want to pop it up on some foam, so I trace around the outside of the frame and then I cut the foam a little bit smaller than the line that I drew, but then I realized I still had to cut it a little bit more. I continued to trim it back until it was the right size, and then I peeled off the backing and I stuck it down to my photo. I'm going to put my photo on the diagonal of flowers, but a little bit more toward the top than in the middle. Now I'm using the die cuts and the laser cuts from the kit, and I'm arranging them going along that line from top to bottom. I'm also picking out a few embellishments to put in the clusters. I know I want to put some butterflies on the layout, so I make a little pile of butterflies to be used a little bit later. And then I spend quite a bit of time arranging all of those elements on the layout. I attach a little sentiment that says "Hello, lovely" to the bottom of the frame. I love those sentiments that are on a curve. I just think that they fit so easily on layouts. The sentiments look a little bit more festive, I think, when they're on the curve. And now I'm playing around with the flowers. I want to make sure that they're layered in a way that they look like one big cohesive unit. That wasn't hard to do because, as I mentioned earlier, there were lots and lots of flowers in the kit, so I was able to layer them on top of each other. And I think that by the time I'm done with the layout, those flowers look very full. Right now, they kind of look like a line, but I make some adjustments along the way to make them look a little bit more filled out. I wanted to add a little bit more dimension to the larger die cuts, so I put some foam behind them. I'm not worrying about popping up the entire die cut. I just want there to be a little bit of dimension. Some of the flowers are attached directly to the page and some are popped up a little bit, and I like the way those two look next to each other. If you've watched my videos before, you may know that I really don't like to waste any scrapbooking supplies. If something's going to get covered up, I do try to cut it apart from everything else or save it in some way so that I could use it on another part of a layout. I think that partially comes from having scrapbooked for so many years and so many times using paper behind something and then realizing that I need more of it. So I am always trying to make the most out of all the paper and embellishments. So there was a blue flower that was behind the frame. It was part of one of the clusters. So I cut it out from behind the frame so that I could use it, and I do end up using it on another part of the layout. I use ATG adhesive and I attach these clusters of flowers down to the background. I continue to arrange them as I go along. That's just something that I always end up doing. No matter how set I think I am with something, I'm always trying it another way before attaching it down. To help fill out this floral arrangement, I added some clusters of leaves, again attaching them down with the ATG adhesive. And I love that because it's very easy to reposition things with the ATG adhesive, although it does also hold up over the long run. I added another layer of foam to the photo. I just felt that since I was popping up some of the flowers, I wanted to give a little bit of extra dimension to the photo so that it would be the highest thing on the page. I clipped a small grouping of flowers off of one of the die cuts. I liked it because it was very delicate, and I tried it in different places, and I decided that it looked nice in the upper right-hand corner in that little cluster. So in that cluster, I have a flower, I have that small flower cluster, and I'm going to layer the title on top of it. I pop up the title, and then I decided not to use this title. I decided on another title, and I cannot find this title today anywhere. I was looking all over for it. I checked through the trash bin. I checked on everything I could find. I'll probably find it stuck to something a year from now. But luckily, there were a number of titles in this kit, so I was able to use some other titles on other layouts. I wasn't short on titles. I added a little cluster of dimensional flowers to the edge of the frame. I love the way there was a slightly larger flower, a smaller flower, and then some tiny buds on the left-hand side of that cluster. And then that cluster was ready-made, and so I was able to just place it on the frame, and I think that that adds a little bit of dimension, but doesn't overpower all the other flowers that I already have down there on the layout. This is when I switched the titles. Now the title says Together, and I liked the blue color of that title a little bit more than the green one in Today for this particular layout. One thing I didn't like about the word Today for where I had it on the layout was that the Y kind of went off the page, so I prefer the Together where there's nothing going off the page. I spent a little bit of time rearranging that cluster in the upper right-hand corner. And then there were a whole bunch of, I think they're branches with buds on them. It could be another kind of flower or tree, but I think that they're buds. And they had them in several different colors in the kit. I decided to only include the white ones on this particular layout because I already had so much pink and so much blue, and I thought that white would make a nice addition to this large flower cluster. I already prepared these butterflies by putting some foam behind the wings, and then I added some adhesive to the wings and to the center of the butterfly so that pressing down on the center of the butterfly would cause the wings to pop up just a little bit. And I placed those butterflies all over the layout, and I think that the addition of the butterflies just kind of helps the layout look a little bit more finished. I found that I had another one of those white branch die cuts, so I cut it into some smaller pieces and I tucked those pieces into a couple of places around the large cluster. I didn't want the branches to be too long. I just wanted them to kind of fill in some of the gaps in the cluster. Then I begin working on the cluster on the bottom of the page. I added a very tiny green sentiment that says Forever and Ever. I also used a pink rose, and then I used a blue flower as well. I popped up that very tiny sentiment on some foam. I like the way it gave some dimension to that cluster. I also have the blue flower that's in that cluster popped up on some foam. And then I picked up the whole cluster, I peeled it all up, and I moved it to the left. I just thought it was a little bit too close to the large cluster. And then I added a large greenish butterfly to that whole cluster. I added one of my favorite things, which is white die cut bud branches to the cluster. And I'm sorry that I didn't capture that on film, but you could see that I use those die cuts and then I tuck them into the large cluster and the small cluster as well. Now I'm using some heavy gesso and an old bristle brush, and I added some white to the flowers, just gives them a little bit of a highlight, and then I continued with very, very light touches of the white gesso, and I dabbed it on a number of other places on the layout. Now I'm adding some pearls to the layout. I'm using some very, very tiny pearls. They're on adhesive strips. This makes it very easy to attach them down to the layout. I put them in the centers of all of the butterflies that are on the page. I also cut a few pearls and I put them on the two sentiments that are on the page. I put slightly smaller pearls on the smaller sentiment that's in the lower left-hand corner, and slightly larger pearls that are also very small onto the little sentiment that says "Hello, lovely," that's underneath the picture. Once I had all of the pearls attached down and in place, I covered up my photo and I added a few more splatters. I added lots of splatters at the beginning of the process, but I wanted to add some more to have just a couple of splatters on the embellishments that I added. I find that to make larger splatters, I hit my finger against the straw that has the white paint, and then to make tinier splatters, if I take my scissors and tap with the scissors, I find that the splatters are a little bit smaller. So sometimes I like just one size and sometimes I like a mixture of sizes. But I always like to have lots and lots of splatters. I'm kind of on a sequin kick lately. I was cleaning out my scrapbooking room and I discovered how many beautiful sequins there are in my room. So I picked out some clear sequins. There's a little cast of color on them, but they are for the most part clear, and I thought that these would add a little bit of sparkle without adding a lot of color. I used glossy accents and this cool pickup tool that I got at the Scrapbook Expo this summer, and that helped me to put the sequins on the page. That was the very last touch. This layout is complete, and here are some close-ups. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I always appreciate you taking time out of your day to watch my videos. I hope that you'll check out this beautiful kit. This is the limited edition kit for October. You can do that on the My Creative Scrapbook website. The link is in the description box, or you could check out their Instagram account. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I hope to see you on my channel again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.